This is Guillermo Mash on behalf of KZFR 90.1 FM, People Powered Radio. I'm very blessed to have Elisa Della-Piana, who is with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of San Francisco Bay Area. So welcome to the show, Elisa. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and the civil rights work that you do in San Francisco.
Thanks for having me, Bill. As you said, I work at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We work with what's happening on the ground and try to use litigation and policy to make things more just. And I personally have worked on issues of homelessness for a lot of years, both as a sort of a student and now as a lawyer. So I've represented a lot of individual homeless people in court, and now I'm working more on these big cases that are trying to change a policy for the better.
We're pleased to have you and the rest of the folks in that wonderful office down there. So hopefully I can swing in and just say hi while I'm down there in San Francisco.
We'd love to have you.
I got what I'm kind of calling maybe a 2-minute thumbnail on the issue, Elisa, and kind of what you've requested of the city as I look at this letter in front of me.
Yeah, so what's been happening is that, especially around the Super Bowl earlier this year, the city of San Francisco started moving people out of the downtown area, homeless people, and it created a larger number of large encampments here. And the city's response to that, people were pushed out of where they were into one place, particularly in places like Division Street. And unfortunately, the city's primary response to that was a series of large sweeps that involved taking and destroying homeless people's property, moving them out, and fencing the areas where they were. As you might imagine, this did not get people off the street, and actually, of course, when people lose all their belongings, have to start over, it really sets people back from any progress that they may be able to make in their lives. We had one woman who was at a housing appointment or working with the mayor's office to get housing, had left a sign on her tent saying, "Be right back," and when she came back, everything was gone: her medication, her clothing, her tent, their paperwork, a family Bible that was really important to her. And so there's not only a really important human rights issue, how do we treat people who are our fellow San Francisco residents, there's also a really important legal issue. It is unconstitutional for the state to take and destroy the belongings of its citizens, unless there's a really good reason, a constitutional reason, and it has to follow certain processes in order to do that. The city of San Francisco has not done that. And so we are asking them to change their policy or risk lawsuit.
I think one of the quotes you have in there is a fairly recent case where they said the government just can't steal citizens' property under the darkness of night, kind of deal.
Right.
And I know there's been a couple of cases recently. I think there was one in L.A. just very recently where they won a settlement for destroying property. And then Sacramento had a case like 4 years ago where the same thing. There was a big settlement for like $300,000. So it's clear to me that the city should well know that this is unconstitutional. And in my eyes, sometimes it kind of looks at maybe they're looking at this as a cost of business. So why are they trying to force this and, maybe get sued by ACLU and others? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, and we haven't met with them yet, so it's not totally clear. The law is very well established. There are many cases that we bring that are, trying to push or change the law, and this is one area where it's just, as you said, there have been many cases before, and it's really clear that the way they are approaching this property destruction is illegal. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to meet with them and see. I think when we're talking about homeless people, one thing that happens is that people in power don't regard them as people, don't regard them as having power, and so whether something is legal or not, they are at risk of the people in power totally disregarding the law for convenience or, to appease housed people who are complaining.
Sounds like thus far you haven't had a response from the mayor's office on the open letter? Is that
Nothing yet. Nothing yet. We gave
Okay.
them until the end of the month to look into this and get back to us.
Yeah, because I saw June 30th, 2016. So what's the significance of that date? Is it just kind of like, I don't hear from you, we're going to go to the next step?
That's right. We hope that they'll change their policy, but if that doesn't happen, then we're prepared to file a suit.
And no responses thus far from the Board of Supervisors either? On the last page 8, there's like 10 supervisors listed here, I think.
Nothing yet. There is a separate track where Supervisor Avalos is proposing legislation that would, in fact, change San Francisco's policy and practice around this. would provide outreach to encampments to get people into housing, would give people time, would prohibit destruction of property, would do a lot of great things to both that are reasonable and make sense and to make the city's policy legal. So we hope that the Board of Supervisors will act, even if the mayor is not the driving force of that action, to, again, change this policy for the better.
Maybe this would be a good exercise. I mean, I'm looking at the 4 bullets of what you're requesting of the city, so maybe I'll just go through each bullet and then have you kind of elaborate or give us an update on them. But the first thing that is in this open letter of request is meaningful notice to be provided to those who would be subject to seizure of homeless individuals' property, including clear requirements for the notice, content, and posting procedures to assure actual and sufficient notice.
It's sort of... the series of events in some of these sweeps sort of strains credulity. Why would you do things this way? In one instance, the city came in with Caltrans and state agencies, took everybody's belongings, and then posted notices saying that they were coming, and came again later that week. That is not... a notice after the fact is not sufficient for people to be able to move their belongings. Similarly, there will sometimes be no notice. The crews show up and they say, take what you can carry, and the people who are lucky to be present, leave with the stuff that they can have in their arms or their cart. It's sort of hard to imagine, if I'm sitting in a park with my friends and we all have our bags and backpacks, and it's really hard to imagine police coming up to us and saying, take everything you can carry and we're going to destroy the rest. This is notice is an important part of what the city is required to do if there's a situation where they have to take belongings off of public property.
Once again, for listeners just tuning in, I am actually talking with Elisa Della-Piana from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of San Francisco Bay Area, and we're reviewing an open letter on the City of San Francisco's illegal seizure and destruction of homeless individuals' property. And we're moving on to bullet number 2 of request to the city as a form of this letter. Outreach to be provided ahead of any clearing action, including identification of the organizations that will be conducting such outreach.
I think this is important because it's really important to understand the context. We want homeless people to get housing, and I think the city does too. That everyone agrees that people should be able to move off the streets. That the only thing that will move people off the streets is a place to go, and so the city needs to have some recognition that taking and destroying property is not helping that goal. It's making it harder, and separately provide the resources that will enable people to move off the street, will be a meaningful solution to homelessness. And again, I think the city is committed to that. In principle, it needs to play out in a way that provides real options for people.
So we need folks like you make sure practice follows principle.
That's the goal.
Next one was a set of clear procedures and instructions for processing personal property at property removal sites, both with respect to items belonging to individuals present during the activities, as well as items belonging to those who are temporarily absent.
There's been some indication that the city thinks, well, if someone's not with their belongings, then it's essentially trash, and we can throw it away. That's not what the law says. The principle of lost and found is deeply ingrained in our laws, which are actually far more protective of property rights than they are of people, right? And so the law says that for something to be abandoned, it has to be abandoned with intent. It has to be clear that someone intended to leave it behind, and that's not the situation in these encampments. There are clearly set up tents that people are using, and very, very often there are people there saying, this belongs to my friend, and they're still being taken. So it's both about whether the property can be taken in the first place and about the importance of storing it if it must be taken, if there's a legal basis for it to be taken, so that people can reclaim their belongings, their important basic life necessities.
Yeah, I know. I saw some of the stuff that the coalition had done of, throwing people. Some of it's in the letter too, of throwing walkers into trash, into trucks, garbage trucks.
Those advocates got good photographs of those horrible acts.
And then the fourth bullet was a clear and well-communicated process for affected individuals to retrieve all seized items of value and to make claims for property that have been improperly destroyed and or damaged, as well as clear procedures that provide compensation for past seizures and destruction.
This goes back to the point about, not destroying things, storing them so people can reclaim them, and the claims process recognition that the past bad acts the city's done that are clearly illegal, people need to be compensated for those. There have been clear violations of rights, and there should be a clear process by which people can recover damages, get compensated for all that they've lost.
So no, I was trying to thumb through here and find it, but there was a really little bullet item in here, Elisa, that was talking about just how precious few items have actually been booked into a process. I think the number was sticking in my head was 19 out of hundreds and hundreds of these actions. So it's clear that the city, one, isn't following through with processing this stuff. And two, as I look at this fourth one, what process do they have today? I mean, what is on the books as far as the park or recs or police force as far as, these sweeps that they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. The practice differs between city departments. Parks and Rec, when we asked, where do you store the property that you confiscate, their response was, the coalition asked, their response was, our policy is under review. So, there's some indication that there is no place that they store things, which is a pretty strong indicator of the policy and practice they're following. The Department of Public Works has a storage facility, and as you noted, we know of hundreds and hundreds of people who have had belongings confiscated by the Department of Public Works, and only 19 were bagged and tagged. Only 19 ended up at the storage facility. So in policy, or in theory, there's a system set up, but it's not being used properly.
Maybe one question I have, because I had about a half a dozen Facebook comments, and coming from the lawyer's field, you're probably not going to be surprised at these comments, but the comments all had the same vein. These people being city or elected, they're not going to listen unless we sue them. That we need to sue them. We need to sue them, otherwise they're not going to do anything. I mean, would you have any comment on that?
Well, I do think that litigation can be a useful tool when people without power need to create incentives for people in power to act lawfully. Again, we hope that the city will recognize how clearly illegal this behavior is and change it without a lawsuit, but if that doesn't happen, we're prepared to file.
I think I've covered all the points and then some of, the interview that I wanted to do. Maybe I'd kind of open it up for anything you might want to add that we haven't discussed, or anything you want to elaborate on or communicate before we sign off here on KZFR, People Powered Radio.
The one thing I'd say is that this happens across the state, and it happens by Caltrans, state agencies, local agencies. The rights of homeless people are being routinely disregarded, and no matter who you are, if you're listening and you see this happening, one of the things that has made lawsuits possible is taking photographs, documenting videos, talking to the people who are experiencing the loss. In the moment that might be difficult or a bad time if the confiscation is underway, but being there to capture that kind of evidence is crucial, because otherwise it's very difficult to win in court, even though the law is on our side. Yeah,
that's a lot of the good work that human rights are doing through the coalition and otherwise. From a locality of this, it's really kind of fascinating. We've had, like you said, Elisa, this is statewide, but the city of Chico just passed some very draconian laws that relate to, quote unquote, items left in public that are unattended, and then they could literally take them. But I know, as you've seen, because you've said you've done a lot of work physically with the homeless, not only legally but physically out there, you can darn well tell people that are coming back for their stuff. This is all their worldly possessions. Like, I walk through Chico, and every time I come downtown, I see stuff that's kind of like all packaged up, and darn well these people are coming back.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
And then certainly if someone's got a tent with a lock on it with a note, we probably got plenty of cause to think that they're coming back. So
that's right. That's absolutely right. And it's a matter of basic respect for the city to treat the belongings of homeless people like they would treat the belongings of anyone else.
That's a perfect quote to end this on, Elisa. So I really appreciate you calling in. Once again, this is Elisa Della-Piana from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area. And she and I have just been talking about this open letter for City of San Francisco's illegal seizure and destruction of homeless individuals' property. So everyone in Chico, this is kind of a good little exercise. I'm going to get this out on the internet too, so folks can kind of transpose the good work that San Francisco is doing to the community of Chico and beyond. So once again, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.